My name is Eddie Sullivan, and I'm the organizer and the host of PechaKucha Orlando. I'm coming to you tonight live from Orlando, Florida, and I'd like to welcome you to PechaKucha version 28. I know that we have people watching all over the world, not just here in Orlando, friends and family across the United States. And I guess the first thing to say is I hope that all of you are well and healthy and taking care of yourselves during this unusual time that we're all going through together. I know that for myself, staying safe and healthy basically means staying home and exploring cocktail culture, which is what I tell my wife I'm doing. And our team and our presenters are really so excited to bring you this show tonight. We had originally planned to do the show in March, and the quarantine was announced here in Orlando just the day before we were going to go on stage on March 14th. So to start out, I'd really just like to thank the team who worked on that show. Davina, Josh, Mike, and Omar all put in a lot of hours, and it was not for nothing. I also really like to thank our friends at the Dr. Phillips Center, especially LaVon and Mariah. And for those of you who purchased tickets to the March 14th show, I'd like to remind you that the theater has begun to issue refunds automatically. So if you bought tickets, just check your account. You should receive a refund if you haven't already. We were really disappointed that we had to cancel the show. But then something happened a couple weeks later in April that really changed everything. So the year 2020 is a really important year for PechaKucha because that's our format, 20 by 20. And so the leaders of PechaKucha Worldwide in Tokyo really found a brilliant way to keep the franchise going during the year 2020. They started a series of online events, just like this one, which they're calling Inspire the World. And those events have been held in various countries already. We're actually the 12th one of those, in addition to this being our 28th Orlando event. So I was actually asked to participate in one of those events. That was really an honor. I gave a PechaKucha. I hadn't created and performed a PechaKucha in many years, but I found that muscle again and did one about meditation and how being self-quarantined is kind of a lot like meditation. So that was a fun thing to do. And seeing how well it worked, seeing how fun it was, I went back to our presenters from March and I asked them if they'd be willing to do an online event, online version of the show we were going to do in March. They all enthusiastically said yes. And so we did a little rehearsing and worked things out technically, almost perfectly. And here we are. So some of you, maybe this is your very first PechaKucha night ever. If that's the case, I'll just give you a quick rundown of how it works. So tonight we'll have 7 presenters. They're all leaders or experts of one kind or another, people with great stories to tell from right here in Orlando. They don't have a lot in common with each other personally or professionally, but they have one thing in common tonight. Each one of them has 20 slides and exactly 20 seconds per slide. Their slides are on a timer and they do not control the timer. So they have to go through their presentation one slide at a time, 20 slides, 20 seconds each, and they are finished in exactly 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to bring them up. You're going to see them. You'll see their slide in the main window and you'll see them presenting their talk. And I'll bring them up one by one. We'll have a short discussion with them afterwards. And then we'll all come back at the very end for a little group discussion and to thank everybody. So that said, we'll start the show. And I wanted to start the show actually by mentioning the fact that 4 years ago or so in Orlando, we had an event that really changed the city very much. That was the shooting at the Pulse nightclubs. It really brought the city together in a way it had never come together before. And also that year, there was a very contentious election that you may recall. And so as a result of those things happening, PechaKucha Orlando really changed a bit. It became consciously more about what's going on in the world, about current events, about what matters to people, and matters of really urgent concern. So in putting this this show together, it occurred to me that there's probably no matter of more urgent concern than climate change. And I thought, who better to talk about climate change than, let's say, a planetary scientist? So that's our first speaker tonight, is a planetary scientist. He's a professor at the University of Central Florida. His talk is entitled Context on Climate. So his name is Dan Britt. So let's bring Dan on screen. Bear with us while we bring Dan on screen. That's not Dan. Hi, Julie. I see Dan in the corner.
Bringing everybody up, and then we'll bring Dan up when he starts.
Sure thing. It's Zoom, folks. There we go.
All right.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Eddie.
How are you, sir?
Can't complain.
Great. So I'm just going to hand the mic and the platform over to you. And when you're ready to begin, Cody's going to bring your slides up. Just tell him when to start, and he will punch the button, and we'll begin your slides.
Well, I'm ready anytime. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
See the slides? I've pressed it. Dan, you don't see the slides?
I only see me.
Sharing screen and unpinning Dan.
Right. Okay, 1 second.
And maybe gallery view or speaker view, presenter speaker view.
I think I've done it. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a little bit of context on climate change. The very first job I had in science, I was still an undergraduate, was as a lab rat standing in a freezer at 0 Fahrenheit, cutting up ice cores with a bandsaw. And the idea was that we wanted to make measurements of past temperatures and climates. These ice cores were drilled in Greenland and Antarctica, and locked in them was information on world temperatures over the last million years. While I was in the lab, a reporter from the Vashon Island Herald called, and he had a simple question. He lived on an island. He wondered if living on an island, should he be worried about this global warming stuff? I was kind of a snide SOB, so I replied, well, that depends. How long can you tread water? The reporter thought he had a great quote, got very excited. The problem is, of course, what I said was true. Now you hear a lot of seemingly contradictory things about climate. CO2 is warming the globe. CO2 was both higher and lower in the past. We're in an ice age. The ice is melting. Sea level is rising. The Earth was a lot warmer and a lot colder in the past. Again, the problem is everything I just said is true. Thanks to the ice cores, we know that the climate over the last 500 million years very well. Right now, we are living in a geologically short, mild period of a major ice age. The world is now, even at this mild period, much colder than it has been for most of the last 500 million years. The last 3 million years has been an ice age dominated by long, very cold periods with short spurts of warming. During the last glacial peak, there was a mile of ice on Manhattan. Paris and London were Arctic tundra. There was solid winter ice down to the Carolinas. The ice sheets retreated, but not all the way. Only a bit over half of the ice actually melted. Greenland, Antarctica, many places in Canada, Alaska, and Russia are still in the grips of an ice age. If that ice melts, we will get 260 feet of sea level rise. That would be bad. Low-lying terrain like all of Florida becomes ocean. Coastal cities like Miami, Savannah, Charleston, Houston all drown. Atlanta and Dallas become seaports. Much of Northern Europe and the most populated parts of China and India become shallow seas. We've seen this before in the geologic record. These warm periods, when there's no glaciers, were driven by much higher levels of CO2, greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane have a huge impact on climate. Higher levels of CO2 translate into warmer temperatures, melting glaciers, and much higher sea levels. Now, our peak at warming was about 8,000 years ago. Since then, the natural climate cycle should have been causing glacial advances, but the ice is still retreating. This is where CO2 and methane come in. Greenhouse gases started changing when our ancestors invented agriculture and started clearing forests. Slash and burn agriculture and rice paddies are a great way to put CO2 and methane back into the atmosphere. This extra greenhouse gas from our ancestors stopped the climate from dropping back into an ice age. But this was a relatively small input of CO2. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution and fossil fuels, we get CO2 on steroids. Right now, we're adding over 32 billion tons of CO2 a year, mostly from oil, gas, and coal. That increases the CO2 content of the atmosphere by over 0.5% every year. Our problem today is really too much of a good thing. On one hand, it would be bad to crush Manhattan under a mile of ice. On the other hand, it would be bad to drown Manhattan in Miami. And it doesn't take that much water. On the plus side, it will take thousands of years to melt all the glaciers and decades before we see major sea level rise. On the downside, this is a huge problem that we're leaving to our children and grandchildren. They will see 3 to 6 feet of sea level rise this century. And human-caused warming is not a scientific controversy. Scientists know this is real. This is a political controversy. You can band-aid the problem. Miami Beach's solution is to raise the level of the streets by a couple of feet. This makes sidewalk cafes into sidewalk swimming pools during king tides. But the bottom line here is, do you like sea level where it is? Yes or no? We are doing this to ourselves. If you don't care about the world you're leaving your children, then we're done. No need to discuss further. If you do care, you actually need to act. So what do we do? I don't have any pat answers, but I'll throw out some thoughts. We can start by not making the problem worse. Burn less oil and gas. The big users of fossil fuels are electric power generation and transportation, mostly cars and trucks. We can get a lot more of our energy from solar, wind, and nuclear. We can limit fossil fuel use to those times when we can't get wind or sun. China and India can stop building coal-fired power plants. We can make it easier to buy and drive electric cars and vehicles. The average commute in the US is 32 miles round trip. That is way less than the capacity of electric cars. We can do a lot more in Florida. It's a sad joke that the Sunshine State is 44th in renewables. This state does almost nothing to develop, encourage, and use our abundant solar power. So, do you like sea level where it is? Like it or not, if we don't do something, there will be about 6 feet of sea level rise by 2100 and a lot more the next century. 6 feet means goodbye to significant portions of this state. So how long can you tread water? Well, thanks, Eddie.
Bravo. Bravo.
Nicely done, sir.
Unmute everybody. Bravo.
Yay. Yay.
Thank you, Dan.
All the time.
Nicely done. And so, Dan, are we seeing Dan as well? There you are.
Okay, I can see me.
Yep, I can see you too. So I just, a couple things I want to point out. I think you'd agree with me when you originally brought this presentation to the rehearsal with the entire group, it was a little more, I would say, reserved and academic and let's say, a little more white hat. And I think the group asked you generally to talk more about what's going to happen next, a little bit more than originally, and our current situation. And so, I think that it's a little bit sobering to think about where we are and what's happening. And I wonder if you can point to any particularly encouraging signs, or is there any good news, anything that makes you feel a little more hopeful?
Well, the good news is that we're eliminating coal-fired power plants from the US and in the European Union. Because watt per watt, coal puts 50% more CO2 into the atmosphere than natural gas. So that can be a big reduction. Almost every place in the world, this is not a political issue. You don't get climate change denial. Just in the States. There are a lot of places where it gets ignored, which is why China and India are still building huge numbers of coal-fired power plants. But if you're sitting in a town like Shanghai, which is about 5 feet above sea level, this is going to be a problem for you.
Or Miami.
Or Miami, yeah.
Right. Well, I think that perhaps the fact that we're all in this pandemic together will give us a new sense of how interconnected we are and dependent on each other we are, and that maybe we can find solutions together. Let's hope for that. All right. Well, great talk. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again at the end of the show.
Okay, I'll be here.
All right. Yes. Good. All right. So our next speaker is someone who I heard about because I read an article about him and his company in the Orlando Business Journal a few months ago. And I was very intrigued and very curious. And I personally wanted to know more about it. So I reached out to Danny and asked him if he'd be part of the event. And as it turned out, I think that, it's a great talk to listen to after Dan has, depressed us a little tiny bit about the future. I think Danny has a solution that points one way forward for us, particularly here in Florida. So let's bring up Danny.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Danny. Danny Malachuk is the CEO of a company called Calera, and his talk is entitled Let Us Talk. So with that said, let us talk, Danny. You can
Let's go.
All right.
Good evening. I'm Danny Malachuk, and I'm CEO of Calera, an industry-leading global agricultural company based right here in Orlando, Florida. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about food, particularly lettuce, and why I'm passionate and excited to revolutionize the way that the world eats. As the world population is anticipated to grow to nearly 10 billion people by 2050, it's expected that we will need nearly 70% more food produced than we're currently producing today. Without question, we will need to continue to find innovative ways to feed this growing population around the world. In the global imagination, the farm exists as a picturesque landscape between cities where most of us live. We like to think of our food as coming from right down the road, from a local family farm offering food that is fresh, pure, clean, and sustainable. Unfortunately, that is far from the truth. It's estimated that 80% of land suitable for farming is already in use around the world, and scientists and environmentalists say that the leading reason the Amazon is on fire is because farmers are deliberately setting 99% of the rainforest blazes to clear the land for crops and livestock. Such fires are a major cause of deforestation around the world. In the past several years, we've seen an unprecedented number of natural disasters around the world, and it's estimated that more than 80% are climate related, as we just heard from Dan. Whether it be floods, drought, hurricanes, tornadoes, sea level risings, or extreme weather, these natural disasters all certainly impact our ability to feed the world. The leafy greens lettuce in the United States ships about 130 million servings per day, and the global lettuce market size is roughly $30 billion. However, leafy greens have a short shelf life, so it's a race against the clock to get produce to market at the peak of freshness as they lose vitamins and minerals exponentially after harvest. Lettuce has a limited reach in parts of the world. In the US, roughly 95% of lettuce and leafy greens are grown in California and Arizona, and often takes weeks with a large carbon footprint to get from the point of harvest to us here in Orlando. This much time depletes nutritional value and increases the chances the crops will spoil before reaching the consumer. To grow more faster and cheaper, the same fields are used over and over again with pesticides and product dumped into them with fertilizers and spraying the product, using genetically modified seeds and fighting the challenges of weather, conditions, animals, and deadly bacteria. According to the CDC, 1 in 6 Americans is sickened every year by something they eat, with E. coli bacteria leading the way. Nearly 50% of all E. coli foodborne illnesses are attributed to leafy greens, particularly romaine lettuce, farmed in fields with exposure to the elements, both natural and man-made. All the while, Generation Z and millennials continue to demand their healthier, fresher, more local food and more sustainably produced than previous generations, ushering in an era of paper straws, Yelp reviews of the latest and greatest restaurant, and wanting to know their chicken's name before they eat it. Feeling overwhelmed, feeling there must be a better way than traditional farming, well, you're not alone. I believe we can do better in finding a way to address the challenges that are making it increasingly difficult to produce enough healthy, safe, and local food. We must continue to innovate and adapt. What if there was a safer way to grow lettuce and other produce locally that massively reduced carbon emissions, used 97% less water, and didn't need fertilizers or pesticides, used non-GMO seeds, eliminated pathogen concerns, and had a yield that was 400 times greater than traditional farming? Well, there is, and it's here in Orlando. Did you know that there are 2 vertical farms from Calera in Orlando? Pictured here is the High Cube, which opened in 2018 on the premises of the Orlando Marriott World Center. We're also just opened the world's largest vertical farm in the Southeast of its kind in the United States near the Orlando airport, and we're opening one double that size in Atlanta in a few months. I'm working to lead the way in defining what pick-to-plate freshness means from the future by perfecting Mother Nature indoors through combining science and technology with farming. We focus on clean, safe, healthy, fresh by delivering product every single day of the year in a controlled environment. Our vertical hydroponic farms use clean room technology, Internet of Things, big data, and we create perfect conditions for all of the lettuce varieties and herbs that we grow, keeping away pests, bugs, germs, pesticides, insecticides, and they're simply not affected by climate change or by weather. Within a matter of months, we can move into cities previously classified as food deserts, such as Detroit, seen here in this picture, and grow millions of heads of lettuce throughout the year, utilizing existing abandoned buildings and having not a care in the world as to what the weather outside is doing, nor using any more land. Once harvested, our living lettuce is still alive and lasts up to 4 weeks, able to be enjoyed days and weeks after the customer purchases the product, eliminating waste and resulting in 100% yield, while tasting how lettuce was meant to taste, crisp, clean, and fresh. To feed the planet in coming decades, we need to think differently when it comes to agriculture. I believe that our vertical farms are an integral part of the solution, and I truly believe that we can harness the power of science and technology to create a more sustainable food chain for the city of Orlando and the entire planet. To feed the planet in the coming decades, we must think differently when it comes to agriculture. I believe our vertical farms are an integral part of that solution, and I truly believe that we can harness the power of science and technology to make this happen. The world has seen incredible advancement in medicine, transportation, industry, and I'm excited to witness and lead the revolution here in Orlando. Thank you for listening to my dream of helping to make the world a little cleaner, fresher, safer, and more sustainable. And one of the best parts about being human is our God-given reason and intellect to creatively and collaboratively work to face challenging problems with innovative solutions. Thank you again. I'm Danny Mel.
All right.
Yeah.
Yay.
And we're about to go back to huge view. There's everybody. Very nice, Danny. Hey, I know you're not able tonight to stick around for the discussion at the end of the show, and so before you actually do sign off, I just wanted to talk to you for a second, ask about, have you tell the story briefly about what happened with cholera when the quarantine and the pandemic hit, and what happened with the company and Publix. If you could just tell us a little bit.
Unbelievable, yeah. And you know, Dan really struck home. I'm actually sitting here on an island, and I'm not much above that 6 feet above sea level. So, you know, that really struck home in the first presentation. But, you know, we were all set and primed. Calera's been working for about 10 years to get to the point where we are today. And just unbelievable work by some of the smartest people you could ever imagine that I'm privileged to work with. And right when we were about to open, we were on the cusp of our first harvest, and all of our major customers, including the Orlando Magic and the Amway Center, the cruise lines, all of the restaurants, all of the resorts, they all, on the day of our first harvest, boom, shut, gone. So we had all this lettuce, and we had nothing to be able to, or very few people to be able to ship it to, because all of our customers that we'd worked for months, if not a year to secure, were sheltered and shuttered. And so they had no opportunity to take our product. So we were able to pivot quickly, and we had a wonderful working relationship where we'd been engaging Publix. So we reached out to Publix and said, look, we really need to shift to retail. We have all this amazing product, and we want to get it to people in a time of need. Throughout that time period, though, the company and I were out in the field with people all around Orlando, and we did massive lettuce giveaways. We had our face masks, our gloves, and we had at one point a line over a mile long of cars, and we'd pop the trunk, we'd pop it in. We had people crying. They were so grateful. Think of how many hospitality people work in Central Florida, and they're all out of a job. And it was so great to be able to give to our community this amazing product that we had just grown. And that wasn't unnoticed by Publix. They appreciated that. And at the last moment, they got us into their stores, and you can now find our product there. But just a great pivot story. And, you know, COVID not only allowed us to focus on giving back to help those people in need, but more importantly, to really connect with our Central Florida community.
Yeah. And I recall one detail of the story that I think you wrote to the head of Publix, like maybe in the middle of the night. Is that right? Did I get that right?
So we actually had heard that Publix, you know, they were overwhelmed. Imagine going from, you know, their customer base exploded just because people that generally go out to eat, 52% of all consumption is generally out to eat. Well, now everybody was focused on, they had to buy their groceries from retail. So Publix was overwhelmed in a great way. But they came out with an initiative, and they told me on one night, they said, look, I'm sorry, but right now we have to pause. We just cannot take you in. We have no ability right now to process new suppliers and to bring new product in. But they told us that. I unfortunately took the call in front of my whole senior staff team. And the disappointment after working for 10 years to get to where we were, to try to pivot to retail, because we just seen everything vaporized. And I couldn't sleep that night. It was the week before Easter. And my wife and my family were away from me. So good thing that my wife was in bed, because I was tossing and turning all night long, and I couldn't sleep. And so I woke up at 4 a.m, or I was awake at 4 a.m, got out my laptop and wrote a very heartfelt email. And I titled it A Humble Plea to the head of produce for Publix, and just put it all out there. I have 75 employees. I don't want them to lose their job. Everybody else around us is losing their jobs right now. And we have a product that the world needs. It's fresh, it's local, it's clean. It's not handled by people. It's the perfect COVID-19 product. We'd love, and if I'm not sending this email saying if there's anything I can do, and I've made it a lot longer and more in depth than that, then I'm not doing my job. I sent that email at like 4:50 something in the morning, and my phone rang at 8:08, and it had made it all the way up to the top of the chain at Publix. I believe even the CEO got it, and the CEO overrode their mandate, and we got into Publix that very week as a result of that email. And very, very blessed for the partnership that we have with an amazing company, which is Publix.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that among all the many other great aspects of your story, what I love about that particular story and that aspect of it is the idea that, sometimes we hold off, right? We think, oh, I can't approach that person. I can't ask for that. I can't go to him and make that request. And that's absolutely not true. I think, the fact that you were very vulnerable and very open and honest is probably what made it happen. So I think, especially at a time when we're all more connected than we've ever been online, I think that people watching should bear that in mind, that you can go to anybody and you can ask anything, and it might actually work. So I love that part of the story. I love the whole story. I love the lettuce. I actually have eaten Calera lettuce myself, and it's delicious, and that is not a pitch. I promise. I have no dog in this hunt. I don't even like lettuce. How about that? But I like Calera lettuce, and I love the talk, and I love what you're doing, and I really appreciate you being part of the event. So thank you.
Thank you
Nice
so much.
sunset too. That's a
Thank you
nice
so much.
sunset as well.
Nice. All right. Well, our next presenter is actually a personal friend of mine. Not that that carries a whole lot of weight here at PechaKucha tonight, but what happened was we were having lunch one day, and I think, by the way, we can bring Jeff up. There he is. So Jeff and I, this is Jeff George, and Jeff's a financial advisor with Bar Financial Services in Orlando, and a former colleague of mine. And we were having lunch one day early in the year, and the talk turned to money, as sometimes it will. And we were talking about personal finance and really how little people actually know about money, and how uncomfortable they are with the topic of money. And, it began to become apparent, I think, to both of us in the conversation that it would make a great PechaKucha presentation to just talk about what are the issues people have around money, what are the difficulties, what are the confusions, and why do they have those difficulties, and is there a simple set of things they can do to build themselves a better path forward without getting into arcane details of high finance, which Jeff could do if he wanted to, but not tonight. This is really about basic personal finance, right? And the talk is called, Are You Feeling Well Off? So Jeff, I'm just going to let you have the floor, and you can tell Cody when you're ready to start your slides.
All right, Cody, let's do it.
Okay.
I grew up in a family where money could be an uncomfortable subject. As a financial advisor, I've come to realize that we weren't alone. Virtually nobody likes talking about their finances, regardless of how much they have. It's almost as taboo as sex. Tonight, we'll be discussing some of the biggest risks being overlooked. If you're not where you want to be, I hope you're inspired to take action. Statistically, 3 out of 5 people in the audience are living paycheck to paycheck. Only 2 in 5 have over $1,000 saved for an emergency. Most of us are only one hospital visit away from piling up debt, if we haven't already. Who do we turn to if not ourselves? Well, for my generation, mom and dad can help, can't they? When I ask a baby boomer how much money they need to retire comfortably, the most common answer I hear is $1 million. Roughly 3 in 4 who still work have under $150,000. Combined with average Social Security, you're looking at an income of roughly $30,000 a year before tax for an individual. If this is your parent, they might be needing your help. Most of us have life insurance. Less than half have disability, even though it's more than 3 times as likely to get used before retirement. It doesn't matter whether it's an accident, an illness, or recovery from pregnancy. Once we're out of time off, most of us won't be getting paid until we're back at work or on disability. Can you cover your bills in the meantime? 3 in 5 of us don't have a will or estate plan. Among high earners, only a fifth have one that's up to date. Their beneficiaries are sitting on the edge of chaos. Children without designated guardians. The disabled can lose government benefits until they use up their assets. The same goes for addicts and rehab clinics, assuming they don't relapse with their newfound wealth. We're spending more money than ever, even as we fail to address these risks. Consumer debt has soared past the levels of 2008 and never looked back. We have newer cars, fancier phones, faster internet, and bigger homes. All this comfort can crumble in an instant without a strong foundation. How resilient is your lifestyle? So how did we get here? Well, most of us were never taught the importance of these things. Financial literacy is remarkably absent from high school and college curriculums, unless you're seeking it out. For most of us, there was never a time when a proper education was offered on this subject. Fair or not, each of us carries the burden of our own outcome. Growing up, we watched people living expensive lives and thought, this must be what happiness looks like. We let ourselves be told that what we have defines what we're worth, that only the visible is valuable. We spent our money playing the part, but it's never enough. If we live conservatively, sometimes we just feel like we don't measure up. But should we? Even knowing what the right thing is, doing it isn't easy. Stress from working accumulates over time, and at some point, we just need to relieve the pressure. We focus on managing the stresses of today rather than planning for tomorrow's obstacles. It's natural to want to do this, but you owe it to your future self to strike a sustainable balance. The world is changing faster than ever before, yet ironically, we assume our own lives will stay the same, that the good times will last forever. We only see a steady job, a rising stock market. Bad things happen every day, but only to other people. Nobody expects their own life to be derailed. Accepting that the future we want may not be the one we get can be a tough pill to swallow, especially when we know we could have done things differently. Failing to measure your progress can avoid short-term pain, but it also takes away the time you have left to change course. Ask yourself, what are you doing now to make the future you want a reality? A professional can help to guide you, but can you trust them? There are lots of people called financial advisor, but how did they get the job and what exactly do they do? Approach the wrong one and your nest egg could become a nest omelet. Now, this is an exaggeration, but how can you be sure that they're more interested in helping you than helping themselves? It's time to wake up and face the music. If we don't change direction, we might end up where we're heading. Think about the risks you and your family are exposed to. How perilous is your path? Where will you be in 5, 10, or 20 years from now? And will your future self be thanking you for the things that you did today? So how do we get well? First, we need to stop comparing ourselves to other people. Outward appearances and social media can be deceiving. All it shows you is how successfully they're spending money, not how well they're saving it. There are too many people in this country sacrificing their future for the present. Please do not let yourself be one of them. Take control of your cash flows. Create a system that puts your money where it needs to go before it hits your pocket. Make good choices automatic and bad choices inconvenient. Build savings to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses and think carefully about increasing your lifestyle to match your income. Some choices are easy to make and hard to undo. Simplify your finances. Organize them in a way you can see the big picture. Technology is making this easier than ever before, and there are numerous options to choose from. Make it as simple as possible to stay on top of, and then make sure you're actually doing it. Nobody gets off work and says, boy, am I excited to dig through my financial accounts, but it is important. Create a plan for yourself with deadlines and hard dollar goals. Build emergency savings, pay down and avoid carrying credit card debt, and put your money to work. Consider whether your investing goals are reasonable given the risk you're prepared to take, and remember that no outcome is certain. Evaluate your progress at least annually and adjust as needed to keep on track. If you need an advisor to help you, make sure that's what they'll do. Never hand over money at the first meeting. Ask how they get paid and whether they're a fiduciary. Confirm the services they're offering are what you're looking for, and don't be afraid to get a second opinion. If they're not prepared to put your interests ahead of their own, it isn't worth the risk. One size does not fit all. Stop thinking about financial wellness in terms of what you have and start thinking in terms of what you can stop worrying about. Life is about more than our possessions. The simple things in life are free, and they're often what bring us the greatest happiness. What's it worth to you to enjoy them with a clear mind, knowing you've managed the risks as best you can? Change the way you think, and you can change the way you live. What makes you happy, and how can you spend more time enjoying it? The past is water under the bridge, but your future is still unwritten. Take control of your finances and chart a new course. Write your own ending. Thank you.
Woohoo!
All right, thank you, Jeff.
Hey, good job.
Oh,
Thanks. That was great.
Thanks.
I have a question occurred to me while you were giving the talk, and I don't want to put you on the spot
Okay.
with this question, but I'm thinking about how many people right now have suddenly lost a source of income, are threatened with losing a source of income, maybe are looking at some drastically changed financial news for themselves and their family. And they're probably very concerned and very full of fear. And I wonder if you have any advice for them, maybe one or two things that would be very good to do, and maybe something they should definitely not do that they might be tempted to do, but is a bad idea. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I'm gonna answer this generally, but then provide a few specifics. So first of all, control your fixed costs. That is something that we all do still have control over to a certain degree, and you can contact your insurance companies, potentially consolidate, look for a multi-policy discount. A lot of the insurance companies now are also offering discounts based on lower usage, lower mileage for auto insurance. You can contact your service providers, cell phone, utilities. A lot of them are offering discounts or rebates, or negotiate down to a easier service package that might be smaller, but it's something that's more manageable for now. Same thing with TV and internet and all these various things that we assume they're necessary, but to what level and what amount of volume. And then I would say the one thing that you really can't afford to do is be impulsive. And that's a very hard thing to say because people are dealing with stress. People get impulsive when they're under stress. But that's when you're going to make a bad decision, and none of us can afford to do that right now.
So, it struck me that it's similar to what we were talking about with Danny a minute or two ago, with the idea that don't be afraid to make a call. Don't be afraid of a big ask or even a small ask. People are more flexible and more willing to make deals and work with you than you might think. And so having the sort of daring and courage to reach out and, see what you can do for yourself.
Well, we've all been affected by this somehow. And it stinks, but it has brought people together and you can connect in a way that maybe there wasn't an option before. So.
Right. Well, it's, we talked about this talk probably in December or January, and it seems like it's more timely than ever. And that's great. I'm glad you were able to talk to people now when it's even more important and urgent.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's great advice.
Thanks.
All right. One more round of applause for Jeff from the group. Yeah, there we go. And all right. So let's bring up our next presenters, and that's John and Angelique. See if we can get them up.
Hello.
There they are. I can't miss so fast. I was in mid-sip. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing great.
Great. So one of the first things Jeff said in his talk is that money is almost as taboo a subject as sex. And that actually ties in very well to this next presentation because John and Angelique Luna, who you see here, are podcasters with a local podcast called Sex Positive Me. And they're on a mission to spread more sex positivity and understanding and freedom. And the topic they're going to talk about tonight is actually, for some reason, one of the more taboo topics around sex. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes. And that's actually a rather strange thing, but I think you're going to explain maybe some of the reasons for that and dispel some of the myths. And it's a very liberating talk, in my opinion. And I can't wait to have you go ahead and give it. So just tell Cody when you're ready and you can start.
Ready, Cody?
If you haven't guessed, we're a married couple.
Well, a married bisexual couple.
Well, a married bisexual couple in an open marriage.
Well, a married bisexual couple in an open marriage who has a podcast called Sex Positive Me that presents workshops and coach people on sex education and relationships. I am a child of Mexican immigrants, raised in a Catholic family, which means we throw a party for any reason. However, we never talked about sex or sexuality. I've always known I'm bisexual, and people assume because of that I am hypersexual due to repressed upbringing. But that was never the case.
Well, I was raised in a New York Italian Catholic family. The men worked blue collar jobs, played cards, acted macho like the guys from Goodfellas, minus the guns. And the women, well, the women cooked. The women cooked a lot. But conversations about sex and sexuality were non existent. I even went to an all boys Catholic high school, and most of my sex ed occurred in the locker room.
In dating, when my bisexuality came up to a potential male partner, most immediately assumed there was going to be a threesome or I came with a girlfriend. Even in dealing with the mental health industry, finding someone to help me grieve the loss of my daughter's innocence instead of trying to fix my bisexuality was a challenge.
Now, while two girls kissing in a bar is just called a fun Saturday night almost anywhere, two guys kissing in a bar can be a fairly polarizing event, in some places even dangerous. As a bisexual, I can blend and move between the gay and the straight scenes. But when revealing my bisexuality, I've had people tell me they felt betrayed and tricked.
The truth is, there's a huge taboo around bisexuality, and biphobia does exist. We're often referred to as the silent B in the LGBT community, making it extremely difficult to find others like ourselves.
There are a few myths about being bisexual we'd like to dispel.
First, I've often been told that bisexuality itself is a myth. Even in the LGBT community, we're often not accepted. However, we're actually the largest group in the LGBT community.
I've been told that being bisexual is just a transition stage to being gay, and I just need to come to terms with it and come on out.
I was told I was just being rebellious or looking for attention.
I've been told that because I'm bisexual, I'm more likely to cheat and be promiscuous, and as a result, have a much higher risk of having an STD.
And it's been assumed once I'm in a relationship or married, I somehow magically stop being bisexual and just become gay or straight.
And this lack of acceptance has had its toll. Bisexuals have a higher rate of anxiety and mood disorders, and even a higher rate of suicide than our gay and lesbian counterparts.
In the media, bisexual women are often portrayed as powerful, desirable, sexual, passionate creatures, or mentally unstable, bitchy control freaks, nut jobs. These are the role models we're left with, stereotypical portraits of unrealistic fantasies. But they're very hot.
Well, on the other hand, bisexual men are either over-sexualized, always flirting with anyone, trying to mount anything that moves, or we're comic relief. Often we're portrayed less masculine, weak, and submissive to our straight counterparts.
And because of this image and belief in toxic masculinity, bisexual men remain the most closeted group in the country. Most won't even tell their closest friends, wives, or partners, and they live with a secret for their entire lives.
Okay, now a little bit about us. In the first 2 weeks of us dating, we were walking in Pottery Barn, you know, the one over on Park Avenue. And I knew I didn't want to be in another relationship where I had to keep secrets. So I stopped her right there and I told her I was bisexual and I needed to know if this is something she could accept. At that moment for me, time slowed and my heart was pounding in my chest.
After a short pause, I smiled, pushed him against the wall behind him, gave him a deep, passionate kiss. 3 months later, we moved in together. 2 years later, we were married. And this year, we celebrate 10 years of being together, and we're still happy.
A few years after that, with my wife's support, I decided to come out publicly.
Now, it wasn't like we wore a sign all the time, but John no longer had to hide his bisexuality if it came up in conversation.
Although overall, it was a great and liberating experience, we actually lost friends, and that was kind of sad. Eventually, I started looking for support. I mean, I couldn't be the only man in this situation. But after an extensive search, I found the closest active group for bisexual men was in Atlanta, an 8-hour car ride away. And that just seemed a little too far for me.
We then formed Bisexual Male Living, a discussion group for bisexual men. This has become a safe space for bi men to share their experiences and challenges in life, but also for their partners to help them better understand bisexuality in their relationship.
That was 2 years ago. And today we have a meetup group with over 500 members. But when we actually have an event to meet in person, less than 10 members actually show up.
If that's not proof on how closeted bi men are, I don't know what is. If you want to support us, first, don't dismiss our existence. And if someone tells you they're bi, just accept it. Don't question them. They know who they are.
And if you're part of the LGBT community, don't forget about us. In a lot of ways, we're fighting the same fight you are.
If not harder, because we have two sides, the straight side and the gay side.
And if you're bisexual, whether you're in or out of the closet, remember, you have a safe space in Orlando.
We're not alone.
We're not confused.
We're not greedy.
This is not a phase.
This is our authentic self.
I'm John.
I'm Angelique.
And
We're happy
this way.
today.
Bravo!
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Yes.
Thank you.
I think I said this to you when we rehearsed way back in March, but I really think that this talk has the potential to really change some lives out there.
We're hoping.
Yes, both for people who maybe know they're bisexual and are really not comfortable talking about it or admitting it or being public with it. Maybe even if they're younger, they're really not sure about it within themselves, right? But also I think for other people who really don't understand it and think it, like you said, think it's a phase, think it's, you know, a trolley stop on the way to Gayville, all the other misconceptions about it. And I think, you know, one thing, you know, I just want to ask you, you know, what does it actually feel like? What does it feel like to have another person tell you what your sexuality is?
Frustrating, anger.
Yep, it's like someone telling you you can't do something or you just can't be something, and that's just not true. Just because I don't fit into what you see a man should be or a woman should be doesn't mean I need to change for you. I'm just going to be myself.
Right, right. And do you have any particular advice for someone who is, you know, I hesitate to even say struggling to come to terms with this because it sounds like, you know, you have cancer or something. But someone who is,
it's the truth. There's a lot of people out there struggling coming to terms with it because society has made it very shameful and give us a stigma that, oh, that is not, you know, healthy or normal. And I'm like, define normal.
And I want to say in our group that monthly group and meeting, we have men show up who are 18 years old and trying to figure out themselves. And some of them that are 45, 50 years old and coming out to their wives and, you know, dealing with these feelings. And it's very important to be yourself and at least have someone you can talk to about, you know, no secrets. You can put everything on the table and not have to hide stuff.
right, right. I think the fundamental message here is be true to yourself, be who you are, and be that without fear. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but that's the message. That's my takeaway.
Very well.
Right.
Well
And
said.
there's a great song by Billy Bragg, Sexuality. Do you know that song?
No.
Nope.
Check
But
that
I'm
out.
looking it up.
Yeah, it's a great song. And he really gets into this actually. And he says, we can be who we want to be. So
That's fantastic. It's a great
yeah,
line.
it's pretty great. Sexuality by Billy Bragg, probably 30 years old now, an 80s hit. Yeah, check it out. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks again. Give you another round of applause.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And let's move on to our next presenter. We have 3 more to go. Our next presenter is someone who I first heard about because he wrote an article or 2 for the Good Men Project, which is a great website that gets into men's issues. Sometimes, you know, has a really nice, clear perspective on men's issues. That's the Good Men Project. So let's bring David up. Cody, spotlight him. There we go. There's David. How are you, man?
I am good.
Very good. So I think the person who introduced us was our mutual friend Shay. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Yes, Shay is awesome. How do you know Shay?
Wow. I met Shay through my wife. She had needed someone to grab some pictures of her at an event. We became friends, and she kind of always reminds me that, share your brilliance. The world needs it. And so, yeah.
Sounds like Shay.
Yeah, constant reminder.
Yes, so I was really happy that she connected us, and really happy to be able to have you be part of the event. So I'm not going to say too much about you or about your presentation, because I really think it speaks for itself, and I want it to speak for itself. So I'm just going to hand the floor over to you, and you can tell Cody when you want to start.
All right, let's go, Cody. So you may not believe this, but the person before you is a product of loneliness. And I remember the first time I saw this picture, and I remember chuckling, man, that kid, he's seen some things. And as my mom shared with me how that picture came to be, and that I was a product of this seemingly lonely environment, arriving at a time when the country was devastated by one of the worst hurricanes in history, and then being rooted up from the humble island of Jamaica and brought to the States, I was placed early on in this position to be a foreigner to my own country and a stranger to the one that I was growing up in. I learned quickly that it was easier to just put on a mask, stay silent, and avoid the pressure that came with being vulnerable. Otherwise, it was social and emotional death. And as the bullying grew and picked up over the years, I felt that there was something deep down inside that I needed to answer. I put on a mask, and then there was this hero that wore a mask. But what did we have in common? Surely I wasn't going to run around wearing tights and battling people. And I felt like there was this puzzle that was missing, and that I was part of a box that didn't belong in the place that I was. And as mom and dad fought more and more to prove who was right for custody, deep down inside, I searched for the light that would carry me through life. I didn't know where, if anywhere, I would actually belong. And before long, it was just simpler to sulk into the sadness and darkness. And while watching villains and heroes battle together, I realized that as a high schooler in the middle of nowhere, being homeschooled, there wasn't much hope there either. And it felt as if life was just going to be a series of to-do lists of things that I just don't know if I'd be able to do over and over again. But that pain was still there, and the anger that was still there, and it kept building long after I found a career doing a thing that was awesome, designing and building experiences that people would love. And then it kept going. I didn't know what I would do with this skill, because the reality is there was only 3% of people within the field of advertising or technology that looked like me. Who would I share things with? What would I do with this skill? How could I go beyond the feeling of just being this Black man where everyone had a story, and started with things like slavery according to the common knowledge. But going beyond that, I knew that coming from that humble island of Jamaica, that there was much more, that our creativity long before told stories, brought together people, and created heroes who cared simply because they put their everyday problems a little bit to the side and looked a little bit deeper and said, hey, I see you, and you're just like me. We're going through something, and we'll get through this together. And as life went on, I continued to realize that this power that I was carrying would greater compound itself when new things were going to become on the horizon. I didn't know quite what to do with it. I didn't know where I was going to actually go with it, but I had a better sense of who I was and why it was gifted to me. I knew that there were 3 questions that I needed to ask. Why did I really want to take this thing further? And why did I feel like it was so important? How was I going to share it beyond the experiences or chasing the normal things like money and fame? And just what at the end of it all was I going to do? And so after being encouraged by a boss to write a book, and a little bit later being completely scared that there was this new life on the horizon that would be my responsibility, I decided what better to do than jump out of a plane? Because hey, if I can handle that, I can handle most anything. But looking into those eyes, ooh, those little eyes, I found that there was a future that was really bright. It was full of hope. It was full of something different. And I knew that no matter how down or dark that I felt, no matter what was going on, and no matter how bloodied and bruised I felt, that I wouldn't give up, that I would keep going, because at the end of the day, I'm not done yet. Because that little one is looking at me. But for me, I want her to look beyond. I want her to look and to see something that gives her an opportunity to create with passion, to face her fears head on, to cheer herself and say, you know what? I too, I'm not done yet when things get hard. And so began an alignment of things in my life, from personal to community to even the future of career and things that made my life lovable. And it was this really amazing thing, but also scary, because one day out of nowhere, I get a call and a text message and an email from the Orlando Business Journal. Wow, minding my own business, this is a very scary thing to see. And in the midst of it, felt like I was battling something all on my own. But as it turns out, even though I was a little bit scared, and I thought that maybe it could be a sales call, that it was just them showing up because other people said that, hey, this is someone that cares. And so together, a group of us who just showed up and helped out and had fun doing things along the way brought together a sense of community that I had never felt before. We all had something that was making a difference, and that others were able to look always upward through. And so, in the darkest of nights, when things just feel as if they aren't very bright, I know that I can look to my tiny human, I can look to the people around me and say, hey, think, aim, and act always upward, and things will eventually be okay. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Woo!
Woo. So I was thinking while you were talking about a piece of advice I heard from a therapist once, that essentially our job is to become our own parent, right?
Yes.
And I wonder, if you feel that's sort of what happened to you, and where your part of what your journey has been, at least.
I do feel that. I mean, on one hand, it's very conflicting because you have people who are taking care of you. But then on the other hand, the things that you don't realize that you pass on, like your values, your morals, your outlook on life, and how you handle different obstacles, those things you kind of assemble yourself. And so, yeah, I feel like I had to parent myself and kind of say, yeah, you guys did that thing, and that was a little bit messed up. Now that I have this opportunity with such tiny human, I'm gonna try something a little bit different. I'm gonna keep my head and aim always, upward, but I also want that to be a thing where, she can create her own framework around, and kind of parent herself in the things that I kind of miss out with, at least the tools to do it, somewhat right. But yeah.
I think you said a couple times tiny human, and it's that's something I was very conscious of as a parent myself, was that I was raising a future adult, that that's the end game here, right? And yeah, right now she doesn't know this, she doesn't know that, but she's going to learn those things, and my job is to prepare her to stand on her own, right?
Yeah, it's scary. It does keep me up at night.
Oh, it's very scary.
And I'm grateful for it. So yeah.
Great. Well, that was a beautiful talk, and I appreciate your vulnerability and the heart you brought to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Killer talk, dude.
Again, and we'll talk to you again when we have our group discussion at the end. Yes. So our next presenter, let's bring up Ron. That's Jeff. We'll get to him. There's Ron's slide. So when the pandemic hit, our next presenter was in a kind of a unique and amazing position to help out because of the services that World Housing Solution provides, and that's the company that he created and runs. And so actually, you know, unlike a lot of us, when the pandemic hit, he became way busier than ever before. And I was a little concerned that over the past few weeks that he might not be even free to do his talk tonight. So I really appreciate the fact that he made the time to be here and joined us. And he, in fact, is going to be talking about yet another taboo subject, our third one of the night, and that's the F word. I'll let him explain what that is. So Ron, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Cody, take it away. No, not that F word. What I want to talk about is failure and what it means to me, to us, and what I believe it should mean. Failure can and does mean different things in our society. In case you forgot, at one point of your life, failure was encouraged. Walking. Yes, the simple act of walking meant certain failure. It also meant that those who loved you encouraged you to fail and fail often. You trusted them because they were there to support you and cheer you on. That was your community when you were little. Then, somehow, along the way, we lost the ability to ask for help. We lost or were taught that asking for help was bad, that it made us weak. Suddenly, we believed that if we could not do it alone, we had not failed, but we were failures. But the definition of failure is confusing. Take baseball, for example. Failing 67% of the time makes you a hero, not a failure. Succeeding only 1/3 of the time means you're considered amazing, will make millions of dollars, and have adoring fans. However, if a musician hits the right notes only 1/3 of the time, he would be booed off stage. No one would ever accept such performance in this instance. How can being right 33% of the time make you a hero in one instance and a zero in the other? The hero or zero question hit me very hard when the recession struck in 2007. We almost lost everything. We had to short sell our home, our credit was destroyed, and that feeling was devastating and depressing. I thought I could handle it alone, but not asking for help can lead to disaster. But I was not alone. It did not just hit me. It also hit my family, my wife, my kids, and probably some of you. In a lot of ways, I was lucky. I found support around me, but it took me too long to ask for help. That lesson isn't lost on me anymore. Everyone needs help sometimes. Even the late, great Kobe Bryant recognized the power of the support system around him that allowed him to succeed. Family, coaches, teammates, and friends. No matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you may try, it can be done alone, not by a long shot. And the same is true for almost everyone. Today, tomorrow, things may look more difficult and more challenging, but the reality is that your community is there to help and support you. Your family, your friends, your mentors, your network. All you need to do is ask. And that lonely road you were on, the one that seemed like it would never end, will become crowded again, filled with support. But the story does not end here. That personal lesson on how to cope is often lost in the business world, especially in the entrepreneurial world. You see, as an entrepreneur myself, I have to talk about what it means to fail in the business world. The life of an entrepreneur is challenging, difficult, and yes, hopefully rewarding as well. However, the biggest challenge when dealing with most entrepreneurs is that we lie. We lie a lot. You see, the reason entrepreneurs lie to you, to others, and to themselves is that they want you to believe that all is perfect, all is amazing. They are this close to the rainbow. They want you to believe that their life is a never-ending, happy, bouncy Tigger adventure. And sometimes it's true. But very often it is not the case. Our lives are a bumpy roller coaster. Outside we may look like Tigger, and we want you and ourselves to believe that all is happy and fun, but inside we feel like Eeyore. But we don't know how or with whom to share it, or even worse, if anyone cares. Take, for example, my company, World Housing Solution. Our idea was to solve the plight of refugees after a disaster by providing lightweight and strong, rigid, portable structures to protect them from the elements of a refugee camp. A great idea, but at first, our business failed miserably. No one cared about our solutions. It was so frustrating, especially considering the risks faced by women and children in those tent camps. But the answer we got time and again was, tents are good enough. No one bought our shelters. We were literally about to close our doors. But we were saved by an engineer in the US Navy, a member of their construction battalion. Thanks to one person who used and shared our capabilities with others, we were able to fail forward. The journey is not over, and right now we are trying to do our best in responding to the coronavirus pandemic challenges. My experience has shown me that most people do care. It is not only okay to ask for help, it is a must. I had to and still do. The painful lessons I've learned have taught me to not only ask for help, but also to be able and willing to help others. You see, in our case, perfect strangers are the heroes who saved World Housing Solution. Thanks to them, our story, my story, continues to be written. But now I know to ask for help. Embarrassment cannot be part of the equation. I know and trust that my community is there to help. So all is not bad. All is not without hope. Help is all around you. Sometimes it's hard to recognize it, and it's hard to ask for it. But no one ever has been successful alone. Along your journey, people will want to pull you up or push you out if you ask for it. And remember that from failure often comes success. You did not learn to walk the first time out. You failed and failed again, even cried, but never gave up. You overcame the challenges in front of you. Why? Because you asked for help and trusted others. Keep that up. And please, especially today, pay it forward. Thank you.
Woo, bravo!
Hey.
Nice presentation.
Thank you. Wow. I think we have a theme developing here tonight.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, ask for help, reach out. Don't be afraid to ask. And other people are there and want to help you. So, so Ron, one thing I just want to ask you, before you step away from the platform, is about the pandemic response that World Housing Solution mounted a little bit. Why World Housing Solution got involved, and how, and what you've been doing in the past 60 days or so.
So do you want me to channel my Tigger or my Eeyore in this particular case? I can do
Tigger. I want Tigger.
So
bouncy.
So I'll tell my Tigger. We were asked for help. We were asked to provide information on how we will resolve some of the challenges. We were challenged from the Pentagon to the Army Corps of Engineers to FEMA to other individuals throughout the country and abroad. We were asked, how would you solve this and what would you do? And then no one came. So we were sitting here, our entire team, working tirelessly, redesigning, engineering, modifying things to fit particular requirements for hospital use and clinics and how to utilize that. And raising our hand really high saying, Coach, put us in. And unfortunately, what we got was not yet. So the shorter stories that we're currently working on a few opportunities abroad or requirements abroad, but in our own country, we're trying as hard as we can, but so far no one has stepped up to say, hey, come on down, we need stuff now.
Well, that's probably a whole other discussion.
Maybe
a whole other PechaKucha night. But I feel like, thought occurred to me that one thing you and I have in common is that we've been around a while. We've seen a lot. We've seen things go up and down. We've had our own ups and downs, right? And been through things that seemed like they were pretty, final, that turned out maybe not to be final. And I just wondered if you had any sort of advice for anyone younger who's, going through this right now, and it's the first major disaster they've really lived through as an adult, let's say, and what you would say to them.
People are talking about new needs. There's a new normal. Our lives will forever be defined by COVID, good, bad, or indifferent. But there is no indifferent. It's good or bad. People are either making a lot of money. If you're in the mask business, for example, or if you're in the hand sanitizer business, you're not complaining, right? But if you're in the food business or the hospitality business, things are really hard. And what I would say to anyone who's listening is, believe it or not, now's the best time to actually go out and be proactive about what you want to do. There are going to be a lot of requirements, a lot of needs that the old system could not supply and address. And the key is to find out what those are and go after it. So if you are employed and are interested in changing or doing something, you've got 54 hours in a weekend. Use that weekend it's an extra work week to get to do what you love. If you've been sidelined and you've been furloughed or laid off, you know what? I know it may sound grim, but now's the time to go and look. Look, World Housing Solutions started because my previous career as a real estate developer failed. If you guys remember, the real estate market went to hell in a handbasket in 06 or 07. That's where I was, and this is where we are now. So our story's still being written, but it was a swim or sink, and thank God we were able to swim. And again, it took my community, my family, my wife. My kids were little at the time, so they were a little bit oblivious at the time. But for the longest time, I never asked for help until I did. That's when things changed.
Yeah, that's great. Well, again, thank you, not just for the talk, but really thank you for the work that you do. It's so important, and I'm really very pleased that you could be on the program, and very proud to know you. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So, hi, Julie.
Hey.
So we have come to the final presentation of this PechaKucha night. Tonight really comes full circle with Julie's presentation. We started talking about really the world from a planetary perspective, which is probably as big as you can get. And now with Julie's talk, we're going to take it down to a very granular, very local, very specific perspective. And I think that Julie is a great person to deliver that message, because you're someone who you literally have made a significant difference here in Orlando in people's lives, difference for the better. Something you're very focused on and you continue to do. And so I'm excited to hear about the localist revival. So I'll just give you the platform and you can tell Cody when you're ready.
All right. Thank you so much, Eddie. I'm ready to go when you are, Cody. It's 2020, and I don't know if y'all have noticed, but it's not what any of us thought it would be. Climate change, cancel culture, wall building, kid caging, trafficking, mass shootings. We've regressed socially as rapidly as our tech has progressed. Now we're in the midst of a pandemic, and many of us feel helpless to make a difference. Beyond the ballot box, most of us can't change our nation from the top down, but I know we can shift society from the inside out. I'm a localist. For 15 years, I've been nurturing our community by advocating for a local living economy through independently owned businesses, creative culture, environmental harmony, and social equity. My story starts simply. Like many in my generation, I grew up in a children should be seen, not heard household. I came alive in college, embraced by a circle of friends that became soul family. After graduating in 2001, my core crew migrated to San Francisco. Left behind, I craved community and figured others in Orlando felt the same. Around that time, I began to notice how people empower, scheme, and collude to benefit themselves. This seemed very effective at getting results. I knew I wasn't in a position to affect much at the top, so I figured, why not scheme and collude on behalf of what might benefit regular people right in my neighborhood? Gathering people together while calling for community was the first step. From 2005 to 2015, I served as co-owner of an organic community cafe in the Mills 50 district. My methodology there was simple. Lure people in with parties and delicious food and normalize the kooky concept that we should actually care for one another. When folks realized that they were in a vegetarian cafe, we congratulated them on being flexitarian. We never preached. Instead, we welcomed them and acted like eating vegetarian occasionally was a totally normal thing people do. This non-judgmental, no-pressure approach seems effective. Today, Orlando is third in the nation for veg-friendly cities. Once people were dazzled by our hummus, they started asking me, why do I feel so good after I eat here? Aside from using beans prepared to reduce your chances of getting gas, I explained that organic food is grown without toxic chemicals and it's healthier for us, the earth, and farm workers too. For me, I was just being a good neighbor to choose ingredients that weren't slowly poisoning them or our planet. Notice this, I fed them the solution, yummy organic food, and waited for their curiosity to explain the need. No preaching or demanding they change or else, just delicious food and facts when asked. I trusted people to follow their intuition after that. Humans are prideful. If we are going to change our deepest held habits and unconscious bias, we don't like to be talked down to. Given time and space to explore new concepts, a healthy dose of social buzz develops naturally. Change isn't so scary to make together. I went from a virtual nobody in Orlando with zero connections to having a lot of new friends and fans around the cafe. Leveraging our popularity, I schemed bigger for our collective good, recruiting neighbors to collude with. We launched a local first campaign and watched gleefully as Orlando blossomed from a transient tourist town that quite frankly sucked to one with locals embracing Orlando's eclectic neighborhood and makers. The mood shifted from sullen and disengaged to highly participatory. We inspired and empowered people to launch projects, and today, our community is completely transformed by the seeds we planted just over a decade ago. A critical mass in Orlando is creating a new paradigm by eating local food, patronizing indie businesses, and going green. The pandemic is shining a light on our interconnectedness, and it's clear we need more local self-reliance and fair treatment for less privileged people. The hippies were right. Think globally and act locally. Bringing a community into conversation with one another is a critical part of social change. PechaKucha is a vibrant example of this. Eddie curates the topics and tellers with great intention. We learn how to be better neighbors when we hear each other's stories and discuss them afterwards. When we know better, we do better. And as we reprogram our habits and unlearn our biases, we must insist that in our neighborhood, we use our power as a force for good, where we build and bring each other up. Our community thrives when we care, when kindness and justice are one and the same. I've come to see this form of neighborly activism as similar to the example our most famous neighbor, Mr. Rogers, set for us. He very intentionally and often subversively used his platform in the direction of inclusion, peace, and compassion. He used his privilege well and showed us what a real ally was before those words ever entered the zeitgeist. Revisiting my childhood mentor in a recent documentary, I realized Mr. Rogers influenced me to become the pragmatic idealist I am today. He taught generations of us to use our imagination, emotional intelligence, and caring for others to do the next right thing, to look for the helpers and therefore hope in times of trouble. We are the helpers. Look around and listen deeply. What does our community need? When it became clear that face masks for frontline workers were in short supply, Bonnie Lewis built a rapid response volunteer effort to sew masks and deliver them to the hospitals. We need that. Ask yourself, really ponder, how and where can I pitch in? If you're not from here and feel shy about taking a leading role, just know that Orlando is a town of transplants. Claim this place as home. Walt Disney sure did, and now the creative arts is one of our strongest characteristics in a vibrant melting pot of cultures. Our diversity truly is our strength. We are not without our tragedies or challenges. After Pulse, Orlandians lined up to literally give their blood for one another. We've grieved and marched, changed laws and hearts. Today, we no longer see each other as strangers in a strange land, but neighbors sharing a common future that we can shape with our collective effort. Resist the instinct to disassociate or dramatize for very long. The world's got plenty of bystanders and bullies, but could use a few more upstanders. Plant a garden, sew a mask, feed a friend. This is Orlando, where we declare that we actually care. So when the news gets you blue, remember, we are not helpless, but helpers.
Woo, bravo.
Ooh. Thanks. And thank you for that shout out in your talk.
Yeah.
PechaKucha as
I
well.
love what you do.
Yes, same. And I was so happy to see the picture of Bonnie Lewis wearing her mask. Bonnie is a former presenter at PechaKucha Night, gave one of the most really arresting talks I think anyone's ever given about just sewing, basically, and self-actualization through sewing. And it was people were really blown away by that talk and by her work, and what a great person she is, what an asset to the community. So yeah, it was great to see her there. And I know she stepped in right away when
she did. Our kids went to preschool together, so I've known Bonnie a long time, and I was like, go Bonnie, go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, it's similar to Mr. Rogers, right? Where, you know, you kind of could miss what some people are doing because they're not really making a big deal out of it. They're not blowing their horn. They're not self-aggrandizing. They're not self-advertising. They're just going in and doing the work. And it was really amazing to me. There was a documentary, not the Tom Hanks movie, but a documentary about Mr. Rogers a couple of years ago that really went into some detail about how intentional he was about what he did. And that he wasn't afraid to be sort of looked at as almost like a bit of a joke, right? He didn't care because he was on a mission. He knew exactly what the mission was. He was executing on that mission. He was a warrior. And I think that, you know, there's a really great example there, which is essentially do the work, right?
Yeah.
Do the right thing. As you said, do the next right thing.
Which, by the way, so I got to ask, did you get that from Frozen 2, or is that because I just watched that for the first time with my wife a couple days ago, and so I was sitting there, I'm like playing the Next Right Thing song in my head now.
Oh no, I didn't. You know, it's probably in there because I have a kid, but no, that wasn't from there. Although I was redoing the Orlando logo because I'm going to revive that as a movement because I think it's so needed in the coming months and years. And I was like, yeah, Orlando has do in it, you know, like, and, you know, one of the common things we've been talking about is, you know, people who aren't really necessarily asking for permission, but for help. And that is what people like Bonnie have, is that she didn't ask anyone for permission. She didn't call the hospital first, you know, she didn't do anything like that. She just said, oh my God, these people need face masks. I'm going to figure it out. And then she put out a call on Facebook and people were like, I'll sew, I'll cut, I'll deliver. And it was a totally homegrown effort that has happened here in our city. And that's happened in cities, you know, all across America and probably the world, excuse me, the world too. So it's really about, you know, you don't have to ask for permission. Just think about what your skill set is, what you can do to provide to this coming landscape, even if it's something that you're projecting we might need 3 months or 6 months or 9 months from now.
And I'll just piggyback on the back of those remarks, thinking about a lot of the talks tonight and what the messages that we heard from very widely different people, right, with widely different perspectives and what they're doing. But one common theme is, you know, you can essentially rise up, right, to be the person you always wanted to be. You can become what you want to be, who you really are. You can be more than you think you can. And all you have to do is really decide to do it, but it's all there and available to you. You just need to step forward, right?
You know, they always say, like, you know, something like this would create like fight or flight, as if those are the only two options. But I was like, why are we talking about those being the only two options? And truly rising to the occasion is really what is called for right now. And, you know, obviously we have limited capacity of what we can do, but planting seeds in our gardens, you know, right now is something that is very practical and would connect us with the earth. Taking a look at the ways we travel to work, and hey, this, you know, remote thing might be working more for some people than others. So there's things that we can take from this pandemic and this pause that we're in to really refigure out our priorities and how we want to move forward in a way that's the best for the earth, that's best for our local community. I mean, local food, as we're seeing, like supply lines, you know, we don't see them totally getting cut off right now, but that's a real thing that could be happening over the next several months and year, is that we're going to see certain food products fall off the grid, so to speak. So if we have those connections with our farmers and our local restaurants and things like that, you know, we're stronger as a community.
Right, right. Well, we'll talk maybe a little bit more about Orlando itself when we do the group discussion in just a second. But I want to just, before we go into that, I just want to sort of wrap up first by thanking a few people who really made this happen tonight. And that is our intern, Ben.
Yay, thanks, Ben.
There he is. There's Ben. Thank you, Ben. I don't know if Brian is on the screen or not, but Brian from PechaKucha Tokyo was a huge help to us in putting this together. And then finally, Cody. Why don't you bring yourself up, Cody? And Cody is PechaKucha's AV guy, and none of this would have happened without him at all. And I want to, you know, thank the audience for bearing with us in our early technical difficulties, but I also want to assure them that those technical difficulties had nothing to do with Cody, who has done an awesome job from the beginning. And I couldn't do this without him. And I think I would also just like to say that in addition to his technical abilities, he's also just a pleasure to work with and be around, and is a great person who maybe doesn't even know how great he is. So
all right, that's enough of that.
Well, it's true.
It's true.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, enough of that, sure.
Can I take a second just to chime in here on,
hey, Brian.
On our love for Cody? Everybody's and to remark on your guys, could you just be quiet 1 second? This is the kind of things that you can expect in a Zoom call. But Cody did I've seen this done 12 different times in 12 different ways, and everybody has done it a different way. And we've all learned from each other, and we're all teaching each other. And we learned a lot from you, from the way you did it tonight, Cody. So you did a great job.
I'm glad.
And despite this technical difficulties, it was fantastic. So I applaud you. Good job.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Don't steal him away from me. Nobody can hire him away. That can't happen. Yeah, thank you, Brian. And Brian, by the way, is coming to us from Tokyo. And I'm going to get to Tokyo in 1 second, but I just want to make one more point about PechaKucha Orlando. So we offered this first online event free, but we are, in fact, a nonprofit. We're an actual 501c3, and we do, as an entity, have significant operating expenses. So, you know, and we had operating expenses related to version 28 live that were not recouped. So if you are interested in helping us out, there is a PayPal donation link on our YouTube channel homepage. The cover photo has a button on the lower right where you can help us out. And show your support for what we're doing, and we would certainly appreciate that. I'd also just point out that arts events everywhere in Orlando and everywhere else are taking a huge hit during the quarantine. And so, you know, the arts seem to always be the first thing to suffer when things go south. And yet they're the thing that really adds beauty and meaning and sometimes spirituality to our lives. And I can't imagine life without the arts. So if there are arts organizations that are enriching your life, I would just encourage you to go find them, support them, help them get through this so that when it's over, they can come back and be there again for us. So that's my pitch for the arts. So at the beginning, I mentioned that we have a special guest, and you've seen him pop in and out of the screen so far, but I'm going to bring him up permanently to share the screen. It's Mark Dytham, who I have mentioned at every single PechaKucha night is the inventor of PechaKucha and the founder of PechaKucha Tokyo, where they run a monthly PechaKucha night in downtown Tokyo that I believe is sold out every month. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. We're actually running it every other month now, but we've been running it monthly for many years. Yeah, we get 300, 400 folks each time. Yeah, we started 2003, and we just stayed in Tokyo during 2003, 2004, and then 2005, 6, it started going around the world. And suddenly we were in 20 cities, then we were 200, and now we're in 1,200 cities around the world. And it's, you know, we don't charge for the format. I think it's one of the reasons why it's spread far and wide.
Yeah, you mean you don't charge people to use the 20 by 20 format, right? Which is,
yeah, we give you a license to keep it under control. We only give one license per city, and we have a handshake agreement, so it's a low bar to enter, and it's just passionate people like yourself, Eddie, and your fantastic team that want to make a difference in a city. And everybody, as you found tonight, has a fantastic story to tell. And we're very much bottom up. There are other presentation formats out there that are really top down, but we're bottom up, and we really want to hear what your collection, what your skateboard collection's like, or what you're doing in the community. And it's a really great platform. And I think the world really needs that. And we don't promote this. It goes, guys, it goes out. You know, we don't promote the format at all. We promote our event in the city. But this growth around the world has just come because there's a need for people to stand up and show and share their passion, really.
You know, I don't know if I've told you this, but one of the, you know, you mentioned how the format, you kind of alluded to the fact that the format basically makes every speaker equal, right? And
that's right. That's right.
That was really brought home to me in one of the first PechaKucha nights we did. It was maybe number 8 or so, where on the program was, there were 9 people. One of them was the head of public radio and public television in the state of Florida, you know, a very experienced public speaker and television personality, and a very polished, very great speaker named Jose Fajardo. Awesome guy. And another speaker was my friend Alexa, who Alexa had never spoken in public in her entire life, ever, not even in school. Right. And she was about 24 years old, giving her first public talk in this format. And they were the same, basically. They were equal in the eyes of the audience and with each other, because the format, it's genius. It's
interesting. We've had that many times with a student maybe showing their thesis presentation, and then a very famous, in one case, a Pritzker Prize winning architect. And he really struggled. And obviously the student had rehearsed and got it right, and it's a big deal for them. And this particular architect has spoken many times, but he speaks for 90 minutes about his work. So it was, but that's what's great about it. Everybody has the same. And I think the other thing is that the image is the most important thing, not necessarily the talking head. And this notion of 20 slides, 20 seconds, it gives you time to stop, to pause and look at the sides, look, listen and think. And we live in this video generation where you get sucked in and then you come out the other end. But this gives you a chance, your brain a chance to think about what the person's saying. And I think that's really important. And that's what's very, very important with PechaKucha, this chance to make you think, you know. So it's between a podcast and a video. It sits in this in between state. And I think it's been really interesting how it's transitioned from a live event to an online event like this, and it still holds true. Especially because it's very difficult to broadcast video out through this. We actually tried, and videos don't work. So we're in, you know, it's really lucky how this has transitioned, isn't it?
Yes, and I really want to thank you again for pioneering this online format, because it was something that you know, I was pretty intimidated to try. So having you,
no, but it's been a baptism by fire, and Brian and the team here have done a really great job, and your team has done a great job, and little things crop up. We've solved the beginning problem that Brian's got to the bottom of that as we went through this. But it's been interesting. It's been interesting that, you know, we're all socially distanced, and we went from having 100, 120 events a month to 0 in a month or so, yeah. And now we have 40 online events in the calendar that are coming up, yeah. And it's really interesting how, although we're socially distanced, this has brought us closer together. I can drop in and chat to Orlando, which I've never had a chance to do. We were planning to come over. I mean, that was a real thought that Eddie and I were talking about. But this way we can drop in, and maybe next time I can make a presentation. And you've already made a presentation from Orlando into our global event. So this is bringing the PechaKucha community together in a really unprecedented way. And I think it really does pick up on some of the notes that I'd made during the presentations, that there are opportunities here, but you have to be flexible, and you have to look and listen to see what's happening and then adapt into that situation. We could have just said this thing is over because our events, you know, we're not having events. We can't have live events, and we could have just stopped. But I'll just say one little, that's why there's 20 slides, 20 seconds, because I talk too much, okay?
So you invented it for yourself.
Well, okay. Somebody invented it for me. They say I'm the biggest hypocrite. So I just wanted to say a little bit about the Inspire initiative, and then I'll stop. So we started this Inspire initiative back in 2011 when, well, it actually goes back a year earlier for the Haiti earthquake, when we had an online event in 2010 around the world. We had 600 cities then, and we had this online event, this 24-hour Skype, which was such a nightmare, but we did raise $100,000, and along with Architecture for Humanity and Cameron Sinclair and the Ben Stiller Foundation, we actually built a school in Haiti, which was really amazing. That opened February 2011, the school. March 2011, we had this huge earthquake in Japan, and so I'm just completely here. But so what was amazing is the network got together, and we thought of ways, how could the network inspire Japan? It was a very serious situation. 130,000 homes were destroyed in 20 minutes, and 1 million homes were damaged. 200 kilometers of coast were wiped out, and that's still an issue. But the whole community got together to inspire Japan back. Japan's inspired the world with design and culture. Is there a way the world could inspire Japan back? And that's how this initiative started. And we've had many presentations about tsunami, about rebuilding, about the nuclear issues. And we have a whole archive of Inspire Japan. And then our PechaKucha city, Christchurch in New Zealand, suffered 3 major earthquakes, really massive earthquakes. And again, we started an Inspire project for them. And the mayor said that this project really helped rebuild their city by having these events and these presentations recordings. So we're building this amazing archive, and we've done it for Nepal, we've done it for Kumamoto. And so it seemed really appropriate that we should sort of use our expertise there and bring it out to inspire the world. And as we said, we've had 12 events already. Many of the stories that we heard tonight from you really resonate with other stories we've had about face masks and PPE issues. And we're building a great archive there too, which we can look back in the future on. But yeah, it's really exciting
too, Mark. It was really eye-opening for me when I participated in the Tokyo event a couple of weeks ago, to be on the platform with people. There's a speaker in Wuhan talking about life in Wuhan. Yes. People in Great Britain, people all over the world, all of them there's one thing, to have your friends be quarantined, right? Because you hang with your friends, you know what your friends are doing. But to be on a call with people in quarantine all over the world, all of them, wearing masks or whatever, they're in their houses, they're just exactly like us. That was when, for me, it really sank in, like, wow, this is everybody. This is everywhere. It's not any different in Wuhan. Maybe the timeline's a little different, but the situation is the same. And that was, I think the global community that PechaKucha helps build is really a game changer, in my view.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting how our 20 slides, 20 seconds levels everybody. But also this pandemic has done very much the same too, that everybody has to deal with this situation. I mean, it's been leveling for film stars and movie stars, and we all can't go out. We all have to wear masks, and that's a key thing. By the way, we've been wearing masks in Japan for many years during the flu pandemic, or the flus we get, and everybody's very accustomed to wearing them. We've only had 600 deaths in Japan, so 1% of the US. Okay. And I really put it down to wearing masks and if somebody's got COVID and the other person hasn't, and you're both wearing masks, transmission rate is about 1.5%. And I really put it down to that. Also, we don't shake hands, we bow. And I think that I think there's an easy solution here. And, and I think we've seen the same in Korea as well, where people wear masks to stop spreading their germs when they've got a cold, and we have enough of them for everybody to wear them, not just the frontline workers. So masks are the way to go is my top tip anyway.
Yes. It was great to see Astrid on the call. I've never seen anyone rock a mask the way she does.
Well, she says hi, so she's the co-founder of PechaKucha, but she has something on this morning, so I know she's watching. So
great. Well, give her our love if she's not watching, for sure.
But thank you so much, Eddie, for running this tonight and for trusting us. And thank you to all the speakers. They were really, really amazing presentations. And thank you to Brian. Brian, have you got something you want to add there?
Are you there, Brian?
Thanks, guys. No, I'll wait till Eddie wraps it up. But thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, Cody, why don't we see if we can bring everybody up kind of in Brady Bunch format and just have one last bow for the entire group. See if we can get everybody on screen at once.
I think we're there, just maybe not your view.
Yeah.
Are we okay for our
YouTube stream is seeing
over
everybody.
150 viewers? They can see everybody now. That's great. So I would just like to say, again, thank you to every single one of the presenters, not just for doing this tonight, but for really taking a lot of time and thought and effort and creating these talks that were so eloquent and so beautiful to look at and so meaningful. I think that, I've seen a lot of PechaKuchas over the years, and the format always works. No matter who's doing it, no matter how they're doing it, the format is, like I said to Mark, it's genius. But I think you guys added an extra level to it tonight and really made it, it's about as good as it can be. So again, thank you to everybody. I want to give you my own little round of applause right here. Say thanks to each other, and also bow, maybe.
We also have to, Eddie, we also have to do the Banzai picture with everybody's hands up. I don't know if you plan to do that.
Is that what we do? Okay.
Yeah, we have to do that at the end. So everybody have both hands up, try not to, when normally we worry about them putting their hands up and obliterating the person behind them. That's not the case. Okay, 3, 2, is someone going to do a screenshot? 3, 2, 1.
Do that.
I got it.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
All right, we're good. All right. Thank you again. I'm going to say goodnight, and I want to again thank everybody who joined us and stuck with us through our little early difficulties and stayed the course. We will be back. PechaKucha Orlando will be back, I think, in July with another online event. So we will see you then. Thanks again. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Bye from Tokyo.
Night, everybody.